So, hello everybody, welcome, and thank you for joining our webinar from 2025 towards the future of European access to space. Let's just wait a few minutes to give everybody time to join, and then we'll start. I see that most of you are on time. Thank you very much for that. I'm just waiting for maybe 100 people to start. And perfect, we have reached 100 people in the public. So thank you all for being here. I think we can slowly start. In any case, we'll start with the agenda and introduction, so that will give the time for everybody else to join us too. So once again, welcome everybody, and thank you for joining our webinar from 2025 towards the future of European access to space. Let's see how it will go. Let me. So my name is Yelizaveta Shashkova. I'm a research fellow here at ESPI, seconded by the French space agency CNES. And I am notably responsible for the ESPI launch database that I will be presenting to you after an introduction from my colleague Tomasz Krozensky, Associate Director of European Engagement, Communication and Media. And Tomasz will also moderate the heart of this event, which is the panel that will bring together institutional and industrial perspective from experts of the domain. So from ESA, the European Commission, Arianespace, Exolaunch, ESA Aerospace, and PLG Space. So thank you very much to you for joining our event, especially at this very exciting time for launches just ahead of the Ariane 6 launch. And at the end of the panel, there will be, of course, a Q&A with the audience. So please don't hesitate to send your questions during or after the panel in the chat. And finally, we will conclude with a presentation of a new tool we have developed at ESPI, the launch dashboard. So let's dive right into it. So please, Tomasz, I give you the floor to set up the context of this webinar.
Thank you, Lisa. Good morning, good afternoon. A very pleasant day to all of you watching us or following us from wherever in the world you currently are. For those of you who may have not yet engaged with ESPI, we are the Europe's think tank for space, doing all things related to space and perhaps even more importantly, one may say, what space can do for our shared prosperity, for peace, and for future generations. What is there in space beyond space? But perhaps today, the topic that we selected for today's webinar is it's a conscious decision that it specifically links to European capabilities in access to space. How does our launcher ecosystem, how does our space transportation policy looks like? It's really an excellent time to be in European space, and I mean it. The political momentum which we have been seeing for space in Europe has, I would argue, historically been much lower than what we have experienced through just in the past 12 months or in the last two or 3 years. We really see that the political appetite for space is growing. The budgetary announcement or the announcements and the subscriptions, such as those at the sub-ministerial last year, have been extraordinarily high, and while this overarchingly is maybe driven by rationales which many would argue we would like not to see, such as those linked to geopolitics or to security and defense. This is the reality, and this is, the external ecosystem in which European space works, and the interest of the defense world in space just confirms how significant space technology is for other sectors of policy and economy. And for all of that, we need launchers. For all of that, we need access to space. And it has been really an exciting time in the past few months to follow all the big developments, the subscription or the big oversubscription of the European Launcher Challenge at the last ministerial, operationalization of Ariane 6 and Vega C in Europe's arsenal of launchers. Next to it, several different highly ambitious commercial enterprises, some of which we have today at the panel. And just later this week, as many of you know, we will be witnessing the first launch of the Ariane 6 in the 4-booster format, with the commercial launching payloads for Amazon Leo. So it's an excellent time. There is a lot happening, and we are happy to have you with us. And I'm already looking forward to the roundtable. Before doing that, over to you, Lisa, for the presentation of our own data on launches.
So thank you very much, Tomasz. So now, just to be sure that we are all on the same basis, let's start by talking about some data and facts before discussing them. So we started our internal launch database in 2018, and we have added all the launches and their payloads since 2000. The year 2000. So the work of adding the ones before is ongoing, and since then we have been updating regularly this database on a monthly basis. So the data, it's an estimation based on publicly available information that we thoroughly check and complete with an internal assessment. But of course, to give credit where credit is due, Gunter's space page as well as the Wikipedia launch page and the NASA Spaceflight Forum are usually very helpful to start seeing what are all the launches. And then we complete this information thanks to news websites. So I put some of them here, the official website of the manufacturers and operators of the payloads, and of course also our internal knowledge and assessment. So as I was saying, we update this database monthly, and we publish it in our insights that are published at the end of every month to give a synthetic overview of the major developments in the global space sector. And so at the end of the insights, you have the monthly launch data that you can discover. And a few weeks ago, we have also published an overview of all the launch data in 2025. So this is what we're going to dive in right now. And so as every year since 2019, the past year has been full of records in terms of the total number of launches, the total number of payloads launched, and also the total mass of payloads launched, with a culmination in December 2025 with 40 launches in 1 month, an all-time record. And so now let's see who is launching that much. So we had 329 launches in 2029, which is a 25% increase compared to 2024. Not surprisingly, over half of these launches are from the US, thanks to SpaceX, who is on top of the launch service provider's podium. Then we have China with a bit over half of American launches with the governmental CASC. And then Rocket Lab brings New Zealand in the 3rd position, thanks to 18 launches. Then Russia tails right after with 17 launches. And finally, we get to Europe with its 8 launches. 4 of these are Ariane 6, 3 are Vega C, and then we had also the maiden launch of Spectrum. So congrats to Isar for it. Now let's see what exactly is being launched. So in 2025, over 4,500 payloads were launched, over 3,700 American ones, of which around 2,600 were Starlings. This is, of course, what dominates most of the graphs that we are going to see. For the next 2 graphs, we'll be considering payloads in terms of mass instead of number to account for the many CubeSats that are being launched. And so the top manufacturer are still the US with 83% of the market, followed by China at 11%, and then Europe and Russia at 2% each. But most importantly, it's important to see who launches who. So here on the x-axis, you have the customers or operators regions, while the colors show who launched these payloads. Hence, for most of the countries, like the US, China, Russia, India, and Japan, over 95% of their payloads launched by the country itself. So for example, for the US, only 13 of their payloads have been launched by other countries, so India and New Zealand, actually. And it even includes a 6-ton satellite. Like you can see the small green line on top of the US column. And so, yeah, it's a 6-ton satellite, Bluebird 6. But as you can see, it's still very small compared to all of the other payloads that are launched by the US itself. And this is actually where Europe is an exception, as over 65% of its payloads are currently launched by the US. Well, currently in 2025. Now, I already talked a lot, so I'll give you a last piece of data before letting our guests discuss it. What are these payloads for? So we have categorized the payloads between the 3 main markets and according to their main mission. By doing so, we clearly see that Starlink does dominate every graph they're included in, here in the commercial telecommunication category. So to be able to see what happens for the other missions, let's zoom in. That's when we can see that telecommunication also dominates the other markets. That's also the commercial markets. The second most common mission is technology demonstration and then space exploration. However, space exploration is still mainly performed in the governmental sector, while military does distinguish itself with remote sensing missions. Finally, if we compare it to 2024, the commercial sector grew by 30%, the governmental one by nearly 50%, and the military only by 1%. And so, yes, thank you very much for your attention, and I hope this data will be useful to you and to our panel. And now I'll let you, Tomasz, take over.
Thank you very much, Lisa, for shedding a bit the light on all the different indicators that ESPI has been tracking when it comes to the global space activity. We'll continue with the roundtable part, and I'm very happy that we managed for today to bring a group of perspectives, a group of viewpoints, and group of people who really represent the true diversity that we are seeing in European access to space ecosystem. Before I'll bring you all distinguished speakers to join us on this virtual stage, I will take this kind of a moderator's privilege to set the scene for the conversation. No, ESPI as an organization, we are a policy think tank. Our main job is to advise decision makers, is to work on policy matters, and there is a lot happening, but there is a lot still to be done. We are not the first ones, and we are certainly not the last ones to put the finger of some of the outstanding policy questions and policy challenges that remain in Europe's approach to access to space. And just to mention a few of these points, there is still, and we need to discuss what is our long-term vision. What is our long-term vision now that the ecosystem or the overall both European and external international landscape has dramatically changed? Are we working on sovereignty? Are we working on competitiveness? And perhaps I would underline this, it is both, and the sovereignty and competitiveness need each other, and the pursuit of one benefits the pursuit of the other. There is a lot of continued discussion about European preference. Are we able to put in place true mechanisms for guaranteed access to space, that also leverages European launchers, and in that way that there are also institutions that can aggregate the varied demand from across the continent, both institutions and nations. It is also about, if we are able to anticipate all the future demand and our future needs, it may easily happen, as is currently the situation with Ariane 6, that there is a large commercial order from even from a non-European customer. and what it means for the availability of our launch vehicles for prioritized public payloads, publicly defined missions, even those for the security needs, in a situation where there is a huge backlog within our launch service providers over several years. Also, how can we play better? How can we do better with regards to support to the booming commercial launch offerings in Europe? And last, but certainly not least, are we prepared for the global disruption and to being potentially outscaled by some of the most ambitious programs and initiatives that are out there? Explicitly, one can easily mention Starship soon entering its operational use, and potentially a big customer ship in the segments of connectivity, such as for direct-to-device, for space-based data centers, or for defense needs. Do we want to serve that? Can we serve that? And what it means if other non-European launch providers are entering this field with competitive advantages compared to the European ones. This is certainly not all that is out there, but I hope my panelists will help me to shed some light on these questions. I'm joined today by Vegner Balog from the European Space Agency, by Isabella Poldergo from DG DEFIS in the European Commission, by Charlotte Lang from Arianespace, Robert Sproles, Exolaunch, Andrea Jaime from ISAR Aerospace, and Frances Casas from PLD Space. Ladies and gentlemen, it's great to have you all with us. I will take for also our visitors the liberty to address each of you with your first name. And with that, I would like to open the conversation with a common question for all of you. And that common question is, what is your key message for the evolution of European access to space ecosystem, let's say until the 2030 timeframe? And how is your organization, either institution or a company, contributing to this vision? And in the order of speakers as they were presented, Werner, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Thomas. First of all, good afternoon to all of you. It's very nice to see that we have so many people joining this webinar, and there is such a big interest in European access to space, which indeed is a very important topic. Regarding your question, I will come right away to the key message from ESA. Europe needs to accelerate and scale up its space transportation ambitions and capabilities. So this is the key message. We are starting from a very good basis. So we had in 2025 a very good year. First of all, we had access to space with Ariane 6 and Vega C. We had 4 Ariane 6 launches, 3 Vega C launches. We demonstrated with Ariane 6 the quickest ramp up of any launcher in this class of launchers. And we also demonstrated very high payload injection accuracy. So we are really starting from a stable basis. In addition, last year we had the Ministerial Council at the ESA Ministerial Council, the ESA Council at ministerial level. And also this was highly successful for space transportation. So it's the highest commitment by member states of funds for space transportation ever, 4.7 billion euro. And this will fund stabilized exploitation for launchers for access to space in the years to come. It will also fund the preparation of the future. In fact, about 30% of the funds go to the future, preparing next generation technologies and launchers for Europe. But all of this is just the first step. So next steps need to follow, and all our eyes are already 3 years ahead at the Ministerial Council 2028. And at the multi-annual financial framework of the European Union, also starting from 2028, when important decisions are supposed to happen that will hopefully move Europe forward in the field of space transportation.
Thank you, Werner. Isabella, I will invite you to follow up with another institutional perspective from a European Commission, which has notably been increasing its engagement and interest in the topic of access to space. Isabella, please go ahead.
Yes. Thank you very much. Indeed, the European Commission was until a few years ago, let's say, one customer, or it was and still is the largest customer, institutional customer in Europe for access to space. But after the launcher crisis, there was a strong political push to be more acting in shaping access to space policy in Europe. because space transportation is not just a competitive tool, but also a strategic access to our autonomy. I mean, we can't have space policy if we don't have access to space. This is why access to space is now one of the priority of space policy in the Commission. It was in the mandate to the Commissioner for Space and Defense, and is also prominent in the proposal for the next European Competitiveness Fund, who is going to plan the Commission budget for the next 7 years, I mean, from 2028 until 2034. Because indeed, you were mentioning a vision on access to space. We even believe that it's going to go further, 2030 or 2038. We are preparing also a long-term vision up to 2045. Could be even longer, but it's just a big longer-term plan to restore the competitiveness and an autonomous access to space in Europe. I was saying before, this is first of all a need for the commissions because we need to launch our satellites, but also we think that is a key strategic asset for a competitive access space policy in Europe. We are working on along 3 main work streams. So the aggregation of institutional demand, the innovation, and the support to ground infrastructure. And I think we can discuss it later about these 3 main topics.
Thank you, Isabella. I will pass on the floor to our institute. To our industrial and private sector speakers. Robert, do you want to follow?
Be happy to. Thanks so much. And Thomas, really appreciate you organizing this and putting this on. We really appreciate ESPI and all the work that you do for the entire industry. Thanks for this webinar and this opportunity to chat. Like you mentioned, I'm very much an optimist of where Europe is going and the days that are ahead of us. Yes, we acknowledge things like the launcher crisis that we had. I love the data you prepared. You know, in 2005, 20 years ago, Europe launched 5 times. Unfortunately, we had some you know, we then went through kind of a high point. By my data in 2021, there were on the Soyuz ST, and noting that today is the 4-year anniversary of the last Soyuz ST launch from Kourou. So that, you know, obviously that has changed, and that's no longer a vehicle that's available to us. Went through some dark days where in 2024 we had 2 launches out of Europe, but came roaring back in 2025, as you mentioned, with 8 launches. And this year, I know that we're going to outpace that, going to have many more launches than that. And that's exactly what Europe needs. Europe needs capacity and cadence. And those are 2 themes that you're going to hear me talk about over the next hour is capacity and cadence. And you need that from a variety of sources. As much as we can get that from Europe, we absolutely need it. But as your chart showed, we will depend on other opportunities for that because we are very much in a launch-constrained market. And so that any capacity that you can put up, people will use. I'll get off my soapbox and give the other speakers the floor, but at Exo Launch, we are really excited about the access to space that we can provide through launchers, through our partners, some of which are on this call, some of which are around the world, because capacity and cadence, that's what the space industry needs to be able to put up more satellites.
Your remarks, Robert, make me think of this question that I sometimes keep hearing in the sector, whether it's about launcher-defined payloads or payload-defined launchers. So I leave it for that. Charlotte, I would like maybe you to continue with next, as people potentially can see you're joining us from a most wonderful location. So maybe you can also explain that a little bit.
Yes, thank you very much. So yes, I'm joining from Kourou. I'm very excited because we have a launch in 2 days. So as you said, it's going to be the first Ariane 64, first Ariane 6 launch of this year. And for Amazon Leo, it's going, thank you, Robert. It's going to be the first time that we have a constellation deployment, actually, with 32 satellites. So it's a big milestone for us, and we're very excited about it. And I agree with what you said before. I agree with the fact that we need capacity and cadence, but for that, we also need demand, and that's we come back to the question of whether it's the payload that that determines the launcher or the other way around. But from what we see and from what I mean, from our perspective, what we need in Europe through the years to come is a steady and predictable demand from the institutions, because that's the beginning. That's where everything starts. So we need a model where we have an anchor customer, whether it's a European Commission or European Space Agency. It's still to be decided. But I think that's what we need for from several launch service providers to thrive and to be able to innovate and propose bold solutions for access to space today.
Thank you, Charlotte. I'll turn the stage to two of our speakers who bring a perspective of a full-fledged launch service providers which are European based with their own vehicles, and something, if we were doing this webinar several years ago, would have not been the case. We have two guys here with us, ISR Aerospace and PLD Space, and I'll invite you, Andrea, to follow up with an opening statement on the question. What is it that you think is the most important thing for your key message for European access to space in those next 5 years, and how is ISR contributing to that?
No, thank you so much, Thomas, also for inviting us to this panel. I think it's great, and the number of participants that are joining the webinar shows that this topic is really of interest, because as we say, you can have amazing satellites, amazing technologies, which we do have in Europe, and we're the greatest innovators. But if you don't have access to space, there is little value creation that you make. So this topic is really important for every single European and global. So for us, the key message of what we would like to see the space ecosystem, the access to space ecosystem is in 2030. You all mentioned the keywords already, so I would just repeat those. But scalability is definitely one that, to be flexible, to be sovereign, to be reliable, and to be competitive. I think these are really 4 key words that we would like to see access to space in 2030. We need to have a solution that is scalable. And that's where ESA Aerospace has been working from the very beginning. Those who know ESA, we have set a business that is not just, okay, we do a minimum viable product, we develop one launcher and see where we go next. From day one, our founders, our teams really had the vision, okay, we had to make a product that is scalable, because what will make a difference is that we're not only able to just launch once, but actually to be able to launch thousands of satellites in 2030. So that would be where I would focus, and the key message that we're contributing also for Europe.
Thank you, Andrea. And Francesc, last but not least, your statement for the opening round.
Yes, it will be difficult to complement what my colleague said before. But PLD Space was founded back in 2011 with the objective of providing reliable access to space. And we believe that reliability will be as key as flexibility and, of course, competitiveness. Because at the end, if we don't develop a solution that is financially sustainable in the medium and long term, it will be difficult to compete and to offer a reliable and flexible and competitive access to space, both to institutions and to private, commercial customers as well.
Thank you all for your opening statements. And one point which I take on, and maybe we can start the conversation with that point, is I think several of you addressed the role of institutions, and maybe this is something which should be the first thing put out there. Maybe a first question I would address to you, Isabella. I think you were explicit also in the kind of the mandate that is emerging out there for the Commission, with demand aggregation, with innovation, with the focus on the ground part, which we perhaps have not represented entirely well in the panel setup with the spaceports and related infrastructure. But that could be maybe one thing which I would like to ask you to share more light what the Commission can do on that. And then there were some other points mentioned, like the anchor customer model, the demand per se, the scale of demand. So what is it? How can the Commission be a productive actor in this, also taking into account that the next MFF and the competitiveness fund will be out there from 2028?
Yes, I will try to be brief, so you can also ask other questions to the other speakers. But if there is the need to go deeper, I mean, I'm available for follow-up questions. I think most of the speakers were reflecting on this question of the chicken and egg. So there is a demand and there is enough offer, or there is too much demand and a lack of offers. And this is why the Commission is now preparing a pilot for what we call an IT aggregation platform. So it's a very concrete tool to see what is the demand, the institutional demand, and what is the offer. Because indeed, I mean, I think the dashboard also shown by you before is showing that the demand is increasing in Europe, but also outside Europe. And also, I mean, the webinar today is also showing how the offer is increasing. But really to make this match possible, this is why we are developing this pilot platform. The idea is also, I was saying before, also you just mentioned, the institution is there. The Commission is already commit to promote European access to space, so to launch through European launchers from European territory for most of its satellites. But also we are convinced that to promote the competitiveness of European access to space, we need a joint effort. If you want to be autonomous and resilient and competitive, cannot be only the Commission and ESA to launch European, but we need a little bit more of anchor customer from member states and other public institutions. This will also be a win-win because it will promote the competitiveness of European companies worldwide. I mean, the idea is to have a solid block of institutional demand in order to be competitive worldwide. And this obviously is a bit the core of the proposal that is also today in the ECF. And the other is in the respect on the complementarities of the activities of the other institutions, also to promote innovation. First of all, because the Competitiveness Fund, as you said, is the tool for innovation and competitiveness. So not only in the space part, because now for the first time, we will not have a space program, but space is within a much larger fund. And all the fund, also beyond the windows, is proposing a lot of tools to promote competitiveness and innovation. But also, as you were mentioning before, to really look in the far future. We added this year a game-changing innovation prize. So not really to tell companies what is innovation, but really to let them free to propose where they see innovation in the future. And then obviously the third leg is the ground, because if you want to be autonomous and resilient and competitive and promote a more lively access to space ecosystem, you need also the place where to launch from.
I would turn the same question specifically to Francis and Andrea, to you. So you perhaps represent the viewpoints of commercial providers that are soon to enter a full-fledged commercial use of your launch vehicles. Perhaps you start this time first.
Okay. No, answering back. Now we are very close to access the market. We plan to launch this year, and we hopefully we do it successfully, and then we will need to access the market. The thing is that we need the flight heritage and credibility to fully access the market, and this is where the European Commission, ESA, and other institutions can act as anchor customer and reshape this risk aversion in Europe and trust in the newcomers, as we are able, and we will demonstrate that we are able to deliver a reliable service, launch service. And in this regard, regarding innovation, in our case, for example, we don't want to innovate. We don't want to elevate the state of the art of technology. Developing and manufacturing and operating a launcher from scratch is super hard. And if our vision is that we don't need to add these additional layers of innovation, because at the end, what we only want is to offer a reliable and flexible service to our customers. and our customers, when we receive feedback, they don't really care if the engine is super innovative. They just want to reach orbit in cost, high cadence, and flexibility. So that's where we are working on and what we demand to institutions.
Yeah, maybe something I could add there, Frances, you're right. But I think the innovation should also not always be thought on really the high, deep tech, innovative technology that was never flown before, that was never existing before. Innovation, especially on business, you can have innovative business plans, innovative manufacturing processes, innovation in the supply chain, bring innovative, the innovation happens at all levels, and I think this is innovation that we, or at least at ESA Aerospace, we're bringing in. So definitely, we have not reinvented propulsion systems. That's physics, basically. It's not a completely new, innovative technologies, but the innovation comes on how we are scaling up our production processes, how we manufacture our products, and so on. And that's where the innovation comes in to offer a fully competitive product. And then answering, Thomas, what you were saying, how we see the role indeed of the Commission, the Commission and ESA and other institutions, member states. Indeed, they do have a role, especially for companies like us, because, and Frances, you also said it, no? Yeah, we need still to reach orbit. We're humble about it. We're working hard. We had our first liftoff, which was already like a big accomplishment for us. Working on our second flight, hopefully it's happening next month. But still, there's a lot of the early maturity, the risking technologies that we talk about, where the institutions can support us, help us enter the market, be the first anchor customers that, and Covilio said it once, buy bulk, buy European. So we would like to see already today contracts for 2028. Let's say the Commission or ESA buys 2 dedicated launches for us, because we know there will be enough payloads in 2028. We trust that you're going to make it. We commit to that, and that helps us to enter the market, to increase the trust. Also, it helps us attract new private capital, which we should not forget. This is something what companies like us are doing. We're bringing money into innovative sectors like space from private capital, which is great, and also addressing the topic on the risk. So I see anchor customers de-risking technologies helping us enter in the market, but I think the institutions still need to work out a little bit their attitude towards risk. I think institutions, even though they always claim, well, we have a commitment towards the general public, when investing, because I think the word is investing, when investing on new players like us, it should be seen as an investment. Yes, some players might die, some might go bankrupt, some might not exist anymore, but the ones that will exist will be a win for every single European. So when institutions make a bet on a company early stages, it's an investment, and maybe there are some millions put in this company that will be lost, because the company will be lost eventually in 2 years or whatever, but it actually has been an investment. You have created high-paid jobs. You have brought innovative technologies into the sector. You have created value in the meantime. So this perception of supporting new players has to be seen as an investment, something that it has a win-win for the future. So I would say these are the 3 things that the institutions and governments need to work on.
Charlotte?
Yes, I completely agree with what my colleagues said, especially about innovation. Innovation is not only technological innovation, and maybe we will come to that point later, speaking about reusability. But it's true that we also have to innovate in terms of industrialization, and this is something that we've been doing with Ariane 6. During the ramp up, we are trying to cut costs. We are trying to meet the standard of aeronautic, where you have a lot more series and where the industrialization is lots more advanced than in the space sector. Just to remind everyone that when we had Ariane 5, the launch cadence was about 5 launches a year. With Ariane 6, the target is more around 9 to 10 launches a year. So we are doubling the cadence. So it comes with a lot of innovation on the industrialization part. Also on the competitiveness and its innovation in itself. But this year we're going to have to introduce a more powerful version of Ariane 6 with the Block 2. So that's basically longer boosters. for the launcher to be able to increase the performance by 20%, while the price remains the same. So we are still trying to make efforts on that point. And coming back to what Andrea said about making a bet on newcomers and investments in new companies, I fully share. It's very important, and I think it's not only a matter of investment at early stages of the companies, but it's also a matter of just choosing to launch with European companies when they're here and when they're operational. I think it's really important to come back to that point, because sometimes, I mean, sovereignty is not the cheapest option, for sure. And I say that, I know that on this side, like European Commission and in ESA have been trying to fly as much European as they can, but I'm more thinking about member states. Member states, like too often they go to the US or to other players because it's cheaper. It's true. But I think we have to also take into account the political cost of those decisions, because maybe it may be cheaper in the first and in the short run, but in the long term, it really hurts the industrial base that we have in Europe, and that's what we need to be aware as citizens. And I wish that we can see more member states fly European, and we're trying to cut costs so that they're able to do that easier. But yeah, sovereignty has a
I
cost,
think
and dependency has a price.
I think the point that you make, especially towards the looking beyond the European Space Agency, looking beyond the European Commission to member states, is very valid in this particular regard, as we have been seeing both in terms of the talk, in terms of the strategies and policies that have been put out there, but also in the world part of the equation, where so many new projects, new initiatives being implemented at the national level, and that is a very important perspective in that regard. Robert, I saw you raise your hand, and actually my next point was to you, so I'll let you reply, but also maybe a prompt which I would like to give you for your reply. Now, all of our previous commercial or industry speakers addressed the point on innovation. You represented company which sits with a rather unique model in a unique part of the value chain, so to speak, and how it plays out in your perspective, in your business, what you do and how you innovate in there.
Yeah, appreciate that. And what the previous speaker said, I want to really amplify that, because it is true. Like, we need to innovate, but that's not just on the technology, that's also on the business models. But I really want to echo what Charlotte said. Could not agree more with that sovereignty has a cost. And I want to bring a customer perspective to that. One of the interesting observations that we have about customers is, when at the beginning of a mission, we will say to them, what's important to you? Like, how are you selecting a mission? And typically they will say, well, it matters what orbit I'm in. It matters what the timing of that launch is, when I can be in space. And then it matters what the price is. And usually in that order. And so we say, great, here are your opportunities. And as soon as we present opportunities, that gets flipped on its head, where they say, well, actually price is most important to me, because I can modify my timelines in the orbit. I can modify my mission as well. And so when it comes down to customers actually spending the money, price becomes a more important factor to them than they would admit at the planning stage. But I also want to say that let's look at the data that you presented at the beginning of the conversation, and look at the first and the third most prolific launchers today and how different they are. So you mentioned that SpaceX is the most prolific in 2025. China was the second, and Rocket Lab was the third. So let's look at SpaceX and Rocket Lab. You could not have more different models than those two vehicles. So you've got, of course, the Falcon 9, you've got Electron. Electron being one of the smallest commercially viable launcher on the market today that's launching with Cadence. And Falcon 9, of course, has we know that's medium lift and has a high cadence. Even if we strip out the Starlink launches, SpaceX's own missions, it is still putting up more mass than any other vehicle alone. But that gives me great hope that if you have options on the market, people will pay for it. So if we look at the euros per kilogram for each of those vehicles, Rocket Lab is much more expensive than Falcon 9 is. Yet it is still the third most, second most outside of China, prolific launcher. So that tells us that if the capacity is there, people will use it. And Charlotte, I love the cadence that you mentioned about Ariane 6 is going to launch 9 to 12 times a year. Like this is exactly what we need. And I say this in a positive light. I believe, though, that your manifest has a backlog out through many years, which is a great thing. But it shows us that as much as we can bring to the market, there will be customers that that want that capacity. So these backlogs for existing launchers, are real, and there is demand for additional capacity. So I say this as an encouragement that whatever you can bring to market, there will be customers for that to provide that access to space.
I'll follow up to Werner to you. Feel free to react, of course, if there is a particular point would you like to react to the previous speakers, but I couldn't resist myself to ask more details on the European Launcher Challenge. So we discussed a lot when it comes to this element of innovation and how public actors can support it. I think it is such a unique model how the challenge has been set up, and the oversubscription that you mentioned clearly showcased the willingness of your own shareholders, if I may use that word, the member states of ESA to entrust ESA to play a role in this process. So what's the story behind it? Maybe where do we move from the launcher challenge in that maybe medium-term time frame?
Maybe before I come to the launcher challenge, let me say some general things about the role of ESA, because in ESA basically we have the technical and programmatic expertise to lead and coordinate space technology development and also to develop strategy. And of course, that we cannot do alone. For technology development, we need industry. We really rely on industry to do that. And per our convention, our role is actually really to further industry, to let industry grow. So we are working with all the colleagues here on this webinar to make sure that we have the capacity in Europe that we need to develop the capabilities that we want. Now, with regards to strategy, it's important that we need to work with our member states and, of course, also with the European Union, because a strategy is only as good as the policy on which it is based. And, other countries have space transportation policies. We do have many elements of space transportation policies in Europe, but we do not have really a defined, agreed document that says that's the European space transportation policy. And this is certainly something where our member states play an important role and where the European Union plays an important role. And maybe what's important to mention in this context is that we had a resolution also at CM25, and that resolution clearly stated that autonomous access to space is a strategic priority for Europe. And that resolution also tasked ESA to intensify and strengthen its collaboration with the European Union in the field of space transportation. So we are working towards those goals that we need to reach. Now, the European Launcher Challenge is one aspect of the future. And the idea is exactly, in Europe, we need companies and we need engineers who can build rockets and launchers. And the purpose of the ELC is to give industry the opportunity to do that, so that we have a very lively ecosystem on which we can build in the future. And indeed, not everyone in the Launcher Challenge, may make it to an orbital launch, but the people who are working in these companies, they are being trained, they gain experience, and this experience hopefully will contribute to make us strong in the future. And that's the purpose of ELC, the Launcher Challenge. And the Launcher Challenge indeed is only the first step. Next steps need to follow. So we will need to build on this. But basically with this, we hope to make sure that Europe in the future will be a player on par with other global players in the world, because I think that needs to be our goal if we want to assure that Europe will be, that European citizens will be living in prosperity in the future. We need space transportation, and for this we need launchers and rockets.
You raised the bigger point of the overall political ambition for space, and there is a particular measure which we like to use at ESPI, and which is the total budget or the total public spending that Europe puts on space, measured as a percentage of a European GDP. And historically, we have been monitoring this number to be at approximately 0.07% of European GDP. And the comparison that you can easily put in place next to it is how much this was in the US. And in the US, this was 0.24% historically, plus or minus some decimal numbers. But it's a different level of political will for space. And I mean, you all underlined it. I cannot repeat that this is changing in Europe. The 35 billion for space, for security and defense in Germany, the ESA subscriptions, France increasing. Some specific countries like the Spain and Poland dramatically increasing its subscription and national budgets. This is all I expect. I may be wrong, but I expect this will create that sizable demand. And with that, maybe I'm turning a bit the discussion into a kind of forward-looking aspect. If we're prepared for the demand, then Charlotte, if I cannot again resist myself to ask you, you mentioned a specific number, let's say maybe 9 to 11 launches, but is Arianespace, Ariane Group ready to grow this number if the demand comes?
The demand comes, and if all the excited projects that we hear about in Europe materialize, yes, I think we will consider. I mean, we can consider to scale up and to go beyond, but it requires investments, and to invest in upgrading the capacities. We need to be sure that the demand is going to materialize. So we're here for now. But if we sign contracts in the future, it's totally something that we can look into.
Some of you mentioned earlier in the conversation one word, and I cannot help myself but not to raise the point of the notion of the reusability as a very specific component of the trends that we are witnessing in the launch segment. I put the word out there. I ask you to provide a reaction on that word, but I'll let the brave one take the floor. So whoever wants that, I'm happy to even give a 10 seconds of silence before inviting someone in particular to take up the stage.
Come on, you don't need to be brave for it. I think we all see how reusability is playing a role in the US in the new developments. So of course, even though in our case at this aerospace spectrum is not reusable, and you need to do an assessment when it makes sense to be reusable or not, because reusability doesn't solve all the problems out there. Will not just because suddenly you have a reusable vehicle, you'll be the most competitive one and the one providing the best solution to the customer. Honestly, the customer, and Robert, you say it very well, no? Like the customer has clear requirements. At the end of the day, they don't care if you're reusable or not. If by being reusable, you're bringing the prices down, or if you're increasing your cadence, perfect. But if not, they really don't care. So I think this is an assessment, like each company looking into their business model, looking into their product, needs to do an assessment, whether reusability or not. The reality is like looking into the future, looking into bigger launch vehicles, looking into higher cadence. That's where reusability makes sense. And that's where, looking into the future, I think everybody here, those developing launch services, are looking. That's no brainer. And that's why, for example, at ESA under the FLPP, there are topics on reusability. Also under the Horizon Europe and the European Commission, there are topics on reusability, because that's where also the institutions have a role to help industry speed up on the developments of these new technologies and to understand how they can really make sense in our businesses. But as I said, it's not, in our opinion, is not just the answer to all the problems out there in access to space. In fact, I don't know if somebody else wants to talk about reusability, but I think another topic which is even more critical than reusability is spaceports, like infrastructure. Again, you can have amazing satellites, thousands of satellites without launches, you have nothing. And you can have amazing launch vehicles, but without launch sites, you have nothing as well. And I think that's really a bottleneck in Europe that needs to be tackled. And it's very good that for the next European Competitiveness Fund, there is an emphasis on infrastructure as well as industrialization. I think this is something that it should not be forgotten.
Floor is open to all of you, and if in case there is not a particular hand being raised, which I don't see, I would divert first the question to Werner. You see, okay, that's a mix and match.
Yeah.
So Werner, please, you go first, and I also see Charlotte with a hand raised. So first Werner, then Charlotte. Go ahead.
So just to double down on this topic of reusability, maybe I think in Europe in the past we put too much focus on the cost of reusability. You know, we looked at reusability from a cost aspect, but what we probably missed at the other aspects, and some were mentioned already, and that's exactly, for example, capability. You know, can you deploy a mega constellation with an expendable launcher? Or, you know, economically, it probably makes much more sense with a reusable launcher. The other question is cadence and flexibility. Not if you have to build each launcher that you use, it's much more complex than when you have a launcher kind of in the garage and you just move it out when you need it. Not, and that's also the commercial attractiveness and the availability of a launcher. So I think that there are many benefits of reusability. And I think that has been recognized now in Europe. And so there's a clear understanding, you know, that having a reusable launch, of course, is something that's desirable to look at and to develop.
Are you still there? I feel connected. Okay, it's great.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Great. Yes. So again, I will not repeat what has been already said because it's reusability. It's relevant when you have a business case that works with it. But maybe talking a bit more about the technology, we know that we have to master this technology in Europe, and that we need to accelerate. Maybe just to thank the European Space Agency and the European Commission, because we have an excited project that brings together both institutions with the CELTO program. So we have right now, I mean, the mother company of Arianespace, Ariane Group, has right now a rocket demonstrator, a first stage reusable rocket demonstrator that is standing in Sweden in the Kiruna Space Center on the launch pad, and we're waiting for the first test to happen this year. But it has been a complex development. To master reusability, you have to develop a reusable engine, and that is something that is really hard to master. And as Andrea said, then you need infrastructure, and it's true that today we will need to adapt the ground infrastructure that we have in the Europe spaceport in Kourou. We don't have any infrastructure that could welcome a reusable stage. But we're working on it, and it's something that's really exciting to work on for the next years to come.
The question of spaceports, Andrea, you raised it, and it's getting a lot of traction also in the chat. So maybe a first question, you know, Isabella, you brought up yourself ground infrastructure. Is there any particular mechanism right now when it comes to spaceports and spaceport infrastructure that we can expect in the action of the Commission in the following period?
I mean, as I think was mentioned by many of us, and also indeed the chat is very active on this, this is a bottleneck, because now we are likely seeing the flourish of a lot of new access to space companies in Europe, the increasing demand, but indeed from where to launch is still a bottleneck, because there are not so many spaceports in Europe, even worldwide, and obviously not all are fit for all the needs. So someone is too small, someone is in some place that you cannot reach some orbits. So indeed, we need more, and not only spaceport, but ground infrastructure. I mean, reusability was just mentioned. If you want to be reusable, you also need the infrastructure on ground and also on sea to make it possible. But also, I mean, manufacturing plant and other and plant next to the space pad. So first, easy. We are kick-offing last week a study on mapping critical ground infrastructure. So we start to assessing what is available in Europe and what is missing. So the first was to be to assess what is available and what's still to be developed. And then the need, indeed, in the new ECF is quite still not defined, because we have to talk with the users, with ESA, with member state, to see what could be the supporting measure from the European Union. Obviously, we are not going to develop an union spaceport, so it's just to support existing future initiative from the commercial side or by member state. But if you want to have a competitive access to space ecosystem, the ground is one of the key elements into it.
Francesca, I'll let you react on that, but also with a particular question which I was actually planning to raise to you and to Andrea, is to companies which maybe work more with different spaceports using the multiple number. And my interest is purely in your return on experience of, how is the collaboration with these other entities than what maybe Europeans or Europe in general has been mostly used to before with Kourou. So please go ahead.
Yes, regarding the spaceports, Kourou, for example, has always been our first choice, and it will be the center of our launching operations. We have already started civil works, and we are working very hard to have the complex finished so we can launch as possible. And the collaboration with Agnes and with ESA is going well. Of course, there are different speeds sometimes, but at the end, it's a public institution, and we are a private company, a startup, that we are very fast, but the collaboration is working very well. And in this regard, at this moment, we are the only private company, newcomer, that has already invested working in the civil works on Kourou. So I believe that, for example, before talking about the bottleneck of spaceports, which is true, maybe we should, reach the limits of the only EU spaceports in the European Union, for example. And then regarding the ground infrastructure and testing infrastructure, in our vision, this is a strategic decision. Back in 2015, when we were starting the company, both Raúl Torres and Raúl Verdú, we had the problem because we didn't have any place to test rocket engines, for example. So we decided to build our own infrastructure for testing. Now we have over 150,000 square meters, 3 hours away from our facilities in Elche, and we're able to, for example, manufacture and testing a component in less than 24 hours. And regarding what we were talking about innovation, and I really agree with all my colleagues here that said that innovation is just not elevating the start of technology, for example. This is where we innovate, for example. We like to test like we fly, so we can minimize the risk of launching. We fail a lot here in ground, and that's the reason why we have invested a lot of resources since 2015. Resources that they were not invested in, for example, growing our team or growing or expanding or manufacturing facilities or capacities, for example. And that's our point of view regarding facilities.
Andrea, same question to you. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, from our side, as you know, we do have now an operational launch site up in Norway. And because since early on, we realized okay, you can have, as I said earlier, a beautiful rocket, very functional one, but without the spaceport, you have nothing. We're also sign a contract, a term sheet with CNES to also be able to launch from French Guiana. This is going a little bit slower than we would like, but this is a great asset that I think Europe needs to work towards making it more open, more accessible for everybody, because it's really a unique spaceport globally. But in our case, as I said, we developed our own spaceport together with Andoya Spaceport up in Norway. It's fully functional. We're working very well. We had our first liftoff, which in terms of operations, it worked really well, really, really well. Unfortunately, we didn't to fly too high, too long, but it validated a lot of the systems, and we're getting ready to our next one. Then, Frances, you were also mentioning about test sites. Same for us. I mean, it was not that straightforward to find infrastructure in Europe that would allow to test our engine. So we also developed our own test facilities. And recently, we just announced that even we expanded our test facilities at SSC in Sweden, in Esrin, so also in great collaboration with SSC this time. And this is critical. Without these two elements in our service, we would not be able to be where we are, which we already had a lift off, and we're testing our engines 24/7. And this is, as I said, this is really critical to be able to build a business that is competitive, that is flexible, that is customizable also to the customer needs. But still, spaceport, and especially Isabella, you mentioned earlier, like, okay, to launch all this institutional demand from EU, that's very difficult because within EU, the only spaceport available is CSG, it's French Guiana, and it's not only about places that you can bring a new launcher. There's a diamond that is now being built and extended, but also is about the cadence, it's about the regulations that will apply, the guidelines, who launch first and what, how often can we launch from French Guiana. So it's really the cadence topic, as some of you mentioned early on. This is going to be a topic which can actually have an impact on the competitiveness of Europe, because at the end of the day, space is going to have an impact on how competitive Europe is. And if we're not able to go to space as often as we need to, the region is going to suffer. So we definitely have an open call to support more industry into developing commercial spaceport, into opening up the new ones that exist, and to put an emphasis in infrastructure.
Thank you, Andrea. Before I see two hands raised in the speakers, but before giving you the floor, Isabella and Werner, I'll take the privilege. We are late in the webinar. We're nearing the end in the conversation for a bit of a personal remark. And so, Andrea, you brought up the example of Andoya and your previous experience with the spaceport there. Besides like being extremely cool, like, I guess we are all a fan of space here, and like the footage from that launch, that was absolutely like majestic. I don't know why we did not talk more about that, but I think, and I insisted on it also in my introductory part in this roundtable, is to be positive, and I'm happy that you are positive in that area, because I think we have a reason to be positive. And what personally I noticed in the aftermath of your launch there is that there was a lot of understanding that a launch failed, basically, using different words, and it really bothered me as a European to see that, because it was, for those of us who watched it, it was explicit what's the ambition of that launch, and this negativity in the approach to innovation and to operationalization of new technology. We have to, in my view, we have to turn our narrative as Europeans much more positively towards all of these things that we are doing, even if it means failing apparent or seemingly failing in these early steps. Isabella, I think you were first with your hand. Please go ahead. Isabella, I think you're muted. If you can please check.
Yes, sure. I had just a quick remark, but then you give me good ideas, because, as you said, I think in space, I'm always proud of what we do. I mean, we have the tendency, I think, to be shy or to say, but the US is doing this and that, and to feel that we are behind. We are not. I mean, we have Galileo and Copernicus that are a clear example how we can really be the first worldwide in producing excellent service. And we see now in access to space a tendency, we were leading access to space years ago. And I think we have the capacity, as was saying before, to lead it again. I mean, what we're lacking compared with the others. Now we have also the demand. We have much more offers. So I also see access to space and space policy as a positive side. I mean, we have not to be on the defensive on it. I mean, we are leading, and we will keep leading, I hope, in the future. On the specific demand on the European or EU spaceport, I mean, obviously the Commission, for a certain type of satellites that are security sensitive, has to launch from the EU. Because, I mean, you can also launch a certain circumstance outside the EU, but it's very complicated, because you have to share classified information. You have to share classified items. So this is, I mean, it's a matter of a fact. And the more space we go towards defense, the more we have to protect security. I mean, it's not security sensitive, really security satellites and information embedded into it. This doesn't mean that there will be more and more satellites. I think, and this was my last point, there was a lot of remarks, more than questions in the chat about if we will be able to address all the demand. I mean, the demand is going to increase and it's going to diversify a lot. We will have big and small satellites, big and small constellation, different orbits, different security needs. I mean, there will be purely commercial satellites, small and big. So what we aim at, or we should aim at, is not to address all the European demand in Europe, but really to build a system that is giving autonomy where is needed. I mean, if we need to launch institutional satellites and we want to be independent, we need to be ready to launch European, but also we need to be ready to be competitive, to attract not European customers in Europe, but also why not? I mean, we don't have to be absolutely self address all the needs in Europe. I mean, it's an open system and competitiveness goes in these two directions. We want to, let's say, protect our institutional needs and the needs of the Commission, but also we want to support a system that is open and competitive.
Werner, please.
Yeah, on the topic of spaceports, I also just wanted to mention that, you know, ESA member states at CM25, they committed around 700 million euro again to Europe's spaceport in French Guiana. And a fair share of that money will be used to upgrade and modernize the spaceport. And also the issue of cadence increase is well understood. And, you know, there are efforts underway for this. Now, regarding spaceports, I mean, when you look at other space powers like US or China, they operate between 10 and 15 spaceports, depending on how you count them. So, you know, it's not unusual to have more than one spaceport because different locations, they have different advantages. They offer security, backup, access to specific orbits. So I think those spaceports can be well complementary. And in a way, we are also in a phase right now, basically, where you know, we look at how the spaceports are working and hopefully they will become part of a bigger European ecosystem for space transportation and access to space in the future.
I'm moving towards really the last part of our discussion. Two questions, but the last one will be very, very short. Before we get there, in my introduction, I also mentioned that we have to, as Europeans, generally look out there, what's happening out there in the world, and the risk of being outscaled and the risk of being, you know, the speed of action that is sometimes in the other parts of the world can blind us, and we can be blinded by this bright light of disruption elsewhere. And you know, one particular example which comes to my mind is a Starship, and it's an open question again to all of you. I will not call individually. What do you think the operational use of Starship will mean for Europe's space ambitions, for Europe's access to space ecosystem, but both in terms of the launch segment, so to speak, on it, and also the demand from our institutions and nations to launch their national payload. So the floor is open. Any one of you who would like to react, please go ahead.
I'll be happy to jump in here. It really is a both and. You know, Starship, when it comes online, it will disrupt the way that that mass is sent to orbit, but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't continue to pursue our own sovereignty and our own access to space. Because back to the previous points of the conversation, there's no such thing as a perfect launch vehicle or a launch vehicle that meets all missions. We need all of the above. So it definitely is a both and on this. It will be. My opinion is that we will see an increase in mass that goes to orbit, but a decrease in orbital diversity. So we will continue to need this, you know, the sovereign access to different orbits and different methodologies. So all of the things that we talked about, all of the vehicles that are in development in Europe are still very much needed, even in a post-Starship world.
Thank you, Robert. Werner?
Yeah, I would agree what the previous speaker, what Robert just said. But maybe a more personal view also when I think about why is it important to have space transportation, and especially now in a time of political realism, I tend to think that the best predictor for the future is looking back into history, And when you look into history, you could say those that had access to the means of transportation were the ones that could usually determine the course of history and usually in their favor. And when you talk about means of transportation, you could think back about the time we had the wheel, the cart, maybe when we learned to ride horses, when we had ships, when we had cars, tanks, aircraft. And I think the future is launches and spacecraft because they really underpin our economy when you look at Starlink and, when we think about really resources from outer space. I mean, that's some years ahead. But it's absolutely essential to have access to the means of transportation. And I think Europe can make the choice. Does it want to play up there or does it want to be a second-ranked player? And what makes me very optimistic that at CM25, in this resolution, really European member states said access to space is a strategic priority. And I hope this will guide us in Europe towards a good future.
I like that optimistic ending, Werner, very much. My last prompt to all of you will be a request for a single word, a buzzword, a keyword. I mean, some of you mentioned them already. Some of you mentioned two of them. So I would like to ask you to think about, to concluding the conversation, what is the one keyword out there for the audience that follows us and for the audience who may find this webinar online after we conclude, after we'll be placed there in the public domain? What is the one keyword for Europe's access to space? And I will go individually from the opposite end of the speaking order. Francisc, please go ahead.
I would say reliability.
Andrea.
I think for me it's competitiveness.
Robert.
I love that you force us to use one word, choice.
All right, choice. Charlotte, please.
Autonomous.
Autonomous. Isabella.
Allow me to merge the two, autonomy and competitiveness.
I'll put +1 in my notes. And Werner, you're the last one.
Ambition.
Ambition. All right. Thank you very much. So we have reliability, competitiveness, choice, autonomous, ambition. And there is also mentioning of dual use in the chat, I see. And maybe for those of you who have not yet opened the chat window, there is a good discussion going on there. So we are moving the end of the conversation. But if you have not opened the chat menu, there is some good discussion there, and I encourage you to read it. So we are at the end of the conversation. I would like to thank all of you, the 6 of us who joined us today to speak. I appreciate very much your keeping up to the time and keeping your answers short and managing that we could touch upon different topics. I like to see what's not often the case with the webinars, that we managed to keep majority of the audience engaged with us throughout. So congratulations to you. I think you did well. And it's a testimony also on the discussion that you put out there. We'll continue doing webinars as European Space Policy Institute. We thank all of you who are watching us for your interest and for confirming that this makes sense. With that in mind, I am closing this roundtable part of this webinar. Thanking once again our speakers, and the conclusion of today will be managed again by my colleague Elisaveta. Lisa, back to you.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much, especially to our guests for their expert insights. So much for the great moderation, but also to the audience for all the pertinent questions and discussions in the chat. But before letting you go, as promised, I wanted to present you a tool we have developed to make our internal launch database accessible to everyone. Yeah, so here is our launch dashboard, or at least its first version. So this is our ongoing mission and commitment to make space data accessible to a wider audience in order to support the development of space policy and research. It's interactive and it tracks and visualizes the global space activity, and you can find there most of the information I shared with you during my launch data presentation, but also more. So we talked a lot about spaceports, for example. You can see them here. And so, as said, it's a first version, so we are continuously working on improving it, and would love to have your feedback. So don't hesitate to write to me about that, or with any questions you may have also on the presented data. And so I just wanted to quickly walk you through it. So for that, I'll go directly to our website. Let me see. Share and screen. So yes, I think you should see our website now. So to find it, it's in our research activities. Here, launch dashboards. You can see it there. It's powered by Power BI. And for sure, don't hesitate to, if you use it, to cite us, as it gives us motivation to continue working on it. So yeah, then you recognize many of the previously presented graphs, because here you have the first page showing the overall launch data for the years, and also the spaceports, as we said. As I was saying, it's interactive, so you can choose whatever period you prefer, whatever launch territory you're interested in. You can, of course, preset the filters. Then you have a page where you can see a particular year. So here for 2026, you can see that we only have January, but at the end of February, you will see it appearing too. I also kept the page for 2025, since we've discussed that a lot today. And then you have more details about the overall launches, with also their ownership, if they're private or public service providers, and also the launch outcomes with the successes, failures, or tests. Then for the spacecraft and payloads, you can also see the different orbits. Of course, LEO is prominently shown, and so you can also choose if you prefer to consider the payloads in terms of mass, or on the last page, you also have them in terms of just numbers. So I'll bring back my slides. Okay, so as you understood, you can find the launch dashboard on our website. You will also be able to find there the recording of this webinar, and all of our reports and all of the work that we're doing. You can also subscribe to our newsletter to also know all the webinars we're organizing, other events, and also receive the monthly insights that I shared with you recently before. And then you can also, of course, follow us on all of the social media. So thank you very much for your attention, for being so interested in the topic, and it was a pleasure to have this webinar with you today. Thank you.